Imagine being chased by bullies at your school, only to stumble through a mysterious, unlocked door and fall off a massive cliff into a completely different universe. A world with talking owls, giant cities that want to eat you for dinner, and a missing prince tied to a magical silver chair. Sounds intense, right? Welcome to Hello English.
It is an absolute thrill to be here, and honestly, that premise you just laid out,
Yeah.
it's one of the most captivating openings in all of fantasy literature.
I am so incredibly excited for our mission today. We are going to explore the classic fantasy story, The Silver Chair, by C.S. Lewis. It's this legendary installment in the Chronicles of Narnia series. But we are taking a very specific, unique approach for this deep dive.
We certainly are.
Yeah, we are using this thrilling narrative as a natural language learning tool. So throughout our discussion, we're going to break down the plot, teach key vocabulary, explore highly useful everyday expressions, and, correct some common English mistakes along the way.
Exactly. Think of it as a shortcut to becoming well-informed about a literary classic while simultaneously leveling up your everyday English skills.
And it's going to be fun. But before we get into the thick of it, I know some people might be thinking, wait, I haven't read this book.
Right, and I want to set a very calm, encouraging tone right from the start. If you are listening to this and worrying because you haven't read the book, or perhaps you haven't seen the 1990 BBC television adaptation, please brush those worries aside. You absolutely do not need any prior knowledge of the story to follow along with us today.
That is such a relief.
I am going to guide you through every twist and turn of the journey. I'll explain not just what happens, but the deeper meaning behind it, all while highlighting the English language components you can immediately use in your daily conversations or at your workplace.
Honestly, that makes me feel so much better because I am coming into this completely blind.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I know the name Narnia, of course. Everyone knows Narnia. But I have no idea what actually happens in the silver chair, so I get to experience all of this for the very first time right alongside you, the listener.
That is perfect. It's going to make this so much more dynamic.
Well, so lay it on me. Where does a story like this even begin?
Well, it begins in a rather bleak, oppressive place in our own real world, very far away from any magic. We are introduced to two young students, Jill Pole and Eustace Shrub.
Okay, Jill and Eustace.
Yes, and Eustace is actually a returning character from a previous Narnia book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Oh, got it. So he's been to the magical world before.
He has.
Well.
And in that earlier story, he was a tremendously difficult, complaining child. Just a real brat, to be completely honest.
We all know a kid like that.
Exactly. But he underwent a profound transformation during his first trip to Narnia and totally reformed his character. However, when we meet him and his new friend Jill in this current story, they are not doing well. They are suffering miserably.
What kind of suffering are we talking about here? Just like difficult exams, or is it something worse?
Much worse than exams.
Yeah.
They are students at a place called Experiment House.
Experiment House. That does not sound like a fun school.
It's not. It is a deeply dysfunctional boarding school in England. The administration allows bullies to roam freely and torment the other students without any consequences whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a harsh, unforgiving, and terrifying environment for a child.
That's awful.
To give a bit of historical context from our sources, many literary analysts point out that C.S. Lewis was likely using Experiment House as a social commentary.
Oh, interesting. Commentary on what?
He was observing the progressive education systems emerging in his day and painting a picture of what happens when discipline and structure are completely abandoned.
Right.
And impartially speaking, whether you agree with his educational philosophy or not, within the context of the story, it creates a deeply challenging, oppressive atmosphere for these kids. When the book opens, Jill is actually hiding behind the gym, crying her eyes out when Eustace finds her.
Man, that is incredibly heavy. They are just trapped. It sounds like they desperately need a way out. Which actually brings us to our very first language learning moment. Let's look at some foundational vocabulary that sets this whole plot into motion.
I love that. What is the first concept we need to grasp?
So the first crucial vocabulary word for our listeners is mission. M-I-S-S-I-O-N.
Mission, yes, a highly important word. A mission is an important task, a specific assignment, or a broader goal that a person or a group is sent to achieve.
Right. We often hear it in, military or diplomatic contexts, but it is incredibly common in the corporate world and everyday adult life, too.
Absolutely.
For example, if you are working on a big project at your job, you might say to a colleague, I have a mission to finish my English homework tonight. Or maybe our engineering team's mission is to launch the new software application by the third quarter. It implies a real sense of duty and a clear objective.
That is a fantastic example. It gives the word so much weight.
So applying that to our characters, what is the mission for Jill and Eustace?
Well, to get that mission, they first have to get away from the bullies. As they are being chased across the school grounds, Eustace suggests they ask Aslan for help.
And Aslan is?
Aslan is the great lion and protector of Narnia. So they push through a door in a stone wall that is usually locked. And suddenly they are no longer at school.
Just like that.
Just like that. They've crossed over into Aslan's country. But we will get to their specific mission in a second, because their immediate goal was simply to get away from danger. Which brings us to our second vocabulary word, escape.
Escape. I use that word all the time. To escape means to get away from a place where you are in danger, or to break free from confinement.
Exactly.
You could say, the thief escaped from the police. Or in a more casual workplace setting, you might joke, the executives tried to escape the boring meeting by claiming they had a terrible headache.
A highly practical and probably very true example. Let's pause here and look at the pronunciation of escape. It is a two-syllable word, and I want the listener to place the emphasis or the stress heavily on the second syllable.
Okay, lay it on us.
Let's listen closely. Escape. Notice how the first part is very soft, almost swallowed, and the second part is sharp. Escape.
Escape.
Yes. Try saying that out loud wherever you are right now. Escape.
Escape. It feels very natural when you put the weight on the back half of the word. And honestly, I want to ask you, the listener, a quick question. Have you ever felt the desperate need to escape a tough situation at work or a toxic environment at school?
We all have, I think.
Right. That feeling of wanting to open a mundane door and find yourself somewhere totally new and full of fresh air is a universal human emotion. It is exactly what drives Jill and Eustace through that garden door.
It really is.
So they push through the door, they escape the bullies, and they are in Aslan's country. What happens next? Is it just an immediate, beautiful paradise?
Not exactly. The arrival is shockingly dramatic. When they cross over, they find themselves standing near the edge of a massive, terrifyingly high cliff. The drop is so steep that the clouds are actually below them.
Yeah.
And Jill, who is experiencing this vibrant, magical world for the very first time, becomes overwhelmed. She starts showing off.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, she starts walking dangerously close to the precipice to prove to Eustace that she isn't frightened.
Showing off near a cliff never ends well in any story.
You are entirely correct. Eustace, trying to be a responsible friend, grabs her to pull her back to safety. But in the ensuing struggle, Eustace loses his balance and plummets right over the edge of the cliff.
Are you serious? The main character just falls off a cliff in the first chapter.
It is a breathtaking opening sequence. But thankfully, Aslan the Great Lion appears at that exact moment. He rushes to the edge and uses his magical breath to catch Eustace midair.
Wow.
Yes, he blows him safely across the sky, far away to the land of Narnia. Then, Aslan turns his intense golden eyes toward Jill. She is terrified, realizing her foolishness just cost her friend his safety.
That is an incredible visual. A giant lion blowing a boy across the sky like a dandelion seed. So Jill is left alone with Aslan. This must be where she gets her objective.
Precisely. This interaction establishes the core structure of the entire novel. Aslan gives Jill her mission. She must find the missing Prince Rilian, the son of the Narnian King Caspian, who disappeared 10 years ago.
Okay, find the prince. Got it.
But Aslan doesn't just point her in a direction. He gives her 4 very specific signs, which are instructions or clues that she must follow exactly. He tells her to memorize them, to repeat them morning, noon, and night.
Why does she need to repeat them so much?
Because Aslan warns her that the air in Narnia will confuse her mind and make her want to forget the signs. After she memorizes them, Aslan uses his breath to blow Jill across the sky to Narnia as well.
Okay, so she has a clear set of instructions, 4 signs. This seems straightforward enough. Let me guess, she immediately messes up the very first instruction.
She absolutely does, and the circumstances are fascinating. Aslan told Jill that the first sign was this. The moment Eustace arrives in Narnia, he will meet an old friend, and he must greet that friend immediately.
Okay.
When Jill lands near the coastal castle of Cair Paravel, she reunites with Eustace. They look down at the harbor and see an extremely elderly, frail king being carried onto a ship to sail away. Eustace just stares at the old man, completely silent. Because he doesn't greet him, the ship sails off.
Wait, why didn't Eustace say hello? Was the old man someone he didn't actually know?
That is the tragic twist. The old man was King Caspian.
No.
Yes, But Eustace didn't recognize it because time passes completely differently in Narnia compared to our world.
Yeah.
Less than a year has passed in England since Eustace was last in Narnia, but 70 years have passed in the magical realm.
70 years.
Caspian went from being a vibrant young king to an old man at the end of his life. By failing to realize this and speak to him, they instantly failed the very first sign Aslan gave them.
That is devastating. But wait, Aslan gave Jill the signs. Why didn't Jill poke Eustace and say, hey, go greet that guy, it's the first sign?
Because she is entirely distracted by the spectacle of her arrival. The flying, the castle, the talking animals, the music, it overwhelms her senses. She completely forgets to be vigilant.
Ah, I see.
And this brings us to a highly useful everyday English expression. When Jill finally remembers the sign after the ship is already gone, she's full of regret. In English, when you forget something not out of malice, but because your brain was distracted, you can use the phrase, "It slipped my mind."
It slipped my mind. I love how natural and native sounding that is. It literally paints a picture of a thought being a physical object that was in your head, but it just slid away or slipped right through your fingers.
It is a wonderfully visual idiom. It implies a temporary accidental lapse in memory.
Let's contextualize this for an adult environment. Imagine your manager approaches your desk and asks, hey, did you remember to call that client back? Instead of bluntly saying, I forgot, which can sound a bit harsh or irresponsible.
Right, you want to soften it.
Exactly. You could soften the blow by saying, I was supposed to call my friend, but it slipped my mind. Or, I'm so sorry I was dealing with an urgent email and the call completely slipped my mind. I will do it right now. It shows that the intention was there, but human error intervened.
A fantastic, highly applicable example. What's fascinating here is the deeper thematic analysis C.S. Lewis is inviting us to engage with. He is exploring the profound difficulty of holding on to wisdom or instructions when you are bombarded by the chaos, noise, and distractions of the world.
That is so relatable.
It is. One of the literary sources we analyzed, a top-rated review from Goodreads, praises Jill for being an incredibly realistic character, precisely because of this failure. She isn't a flawless robotic hero. She gets distracted, she panics, she sulks when she makes a mistake. She acts the way any real person would when dropped into an overwhelming situation.
It makes the fantasy feel so grounded. But because they missed that first sign, I imagine their mission just became significantly more difficult. Since Caspian is gone, they can't ask him for help finding his son.
Their task becomes immensely difficult. They now have to set off on a long, arduous trek across unmapped wilderness. And that introduces our next key vocabulary word, journey.
A journey. Journey. A journey is a long trip, especially one that covers a significant distance or takes a considerable amount of time.
Correct.
We use it for physical travel, sure, but we use it metaphorically all the time in English. For instance, you could say, learning English is a long journey. It implies that there will be ups and downs, challenges, and long stretches of steady effort. It is not a quick sprint.
Let's look at the pronunciation of journey because the spelling can heavily trick language learners. You have an O and a U sitting right next to each other, which confuses the I. I want you to completely ignore the O.
Ignore the O completely?
Yes. The word is pronounced J-U-R-N-E. The first syllable sounds exactly like the word jury, or the beginning of journal. Make sure you emphasize that first syllable heavily. It is absolutely not pronounced journey. Let's practice it.
J-U-R-N-E.
Perfect.
So the O is completely silent, just a historical spelling left over. Okay, so Jill and Eustace are embarking on this massive journey. Do they just wander off into the woods by themselves, or do they get some help?
They do get help, and this introduces us to some of the most beloved characters in the entire Narnia series. Initially, they are aided by a large, talking owl named Glimfeather. Glimfeather takes them to a secret nighttime gathering called the Parliament of Owls.
The Parliament of Owls, what an incredible name.
It is a brilliant bit of linguistic playfulness by Lewis. In English, we have specific collective nouns for different groups of animals. A murder of crows, a pride of lions. The collective noun for a group of owls is actually a parliament.
Oh, that is so clever.
Lewis takes this literal definition and turns it into an actual political meeting where the owls discuss the affairs of the state.
I love when authors do that. So what do the owls tell them?
They fill in the missing backstory. They explain that Prince Rilian was lost 10 years ago while hunting a green serpent.
Oh.
Yes, that same green serpent had killed his mother, the queen. Rilian was heartbroken and enraged. He rode out into the northern lands day after day, determined to hunt down and kill the serpent to avenge his mother. But one day, he rode out and simply never returned. No one knows if he was killed by the serpent, captured, or if he just got lost.
So they have to head north into these dangerous lands. They're going to need a guide.
The owls agree, and they introduce the children to their guide, a creature called a marsh wiggle named Puddleglum.
Puddleglum. That is a fantastic name.
And if you ever have the chance to watch the 1990 BBC television adaptation, Puddleglum was famously and brilliantly played by the actor Tom Baker. Marsh wiggles are tall, incredibly spindly creatures with somewhat frog-like facial features, and they live in the muddy, swampy regions of Narnia.
Puddleglum. Even his name sounds damp and gloomy.
His name is a perfect reflection of his personality, which brings us to our next crucial vocabulary word: pessimistic.
Pessimistic.
A pessimistic person is someone who always expects bad things to happen. They habitually focus on the negative aspects of a situation and always anticipate the worst possible outcome.
I think we all know someone like this. Like, he thinks the trip will fail. He's very pessimistic.
Exactly.
If you're planning a company picnic, the pessimistic colleague is the one who says, it is probably going to rain, the caterer will probably forget the food, and nobody's going to have fun anyway. They just radiate a sense of impending doom.
Puddleglum elevates pessimism to an absolute art form. From the moment they meet him, he is constantly predicting that they will freeze to death, starve, be captured by enemies, or simply fail miserably.
I actually have a quote here from our sources that I want to share because it perfectly captures his gloomy outlook. He is discussing his diet of swamp food, and he says, life isn't all fricasseed frogs and eel pie.
I love that quote.
It is hilarious. It is his swamp creature version of saying life isn't a bed of roses.
Precisely. But what makes Puddleglum such a towering figure in fantasy literature is the contradiction embedded in his character. He speaks like a relentless pessimist, but he acts like a valiant hero. He complains about their inevitable doom constantly, and he is fiercely loyal, enduringly brave, and he never once suggests they should give up and go home.
He sounds like the best kind of gloomy friend to have in a crisis. So the three of them, Jill, Eustace, and Puddleglum, set off on this journey north. What kind of environment are they walking into?
They are traveling through a desolate, rocky wasteland called Edensmore. It is harsh, unforgiving winter weather. The wind is howling, the ground is frozen solid, and they are completely exposed to the elements. They're freezing, exhausted, and desperately hungry.
Sounds awful.
It is. And as they are struggling through this wasteland, they suddenly encounter two figures on horseback. One is a silent knight in entirely black armor, with his visor pulled down. The other is a stunningly beautiful lady dressed in a vibrant, bright green kirtle, which is a traditional word for a gown or dress.
A beautiful lady in bright green, riding through a frozen wasteland with a silent knight. That doesn't sound suspicious at all. I am guessing she is incredibly friendly and offers them a warm place to stay.
She is overwhelmingly charming and kind. She sees how miserable and shivering the children are, and she speaks to them with immense sweetness. She suggests they travel to the nearby castle of Harfang, which she says is inhabited by the gentle giants.
Gentle giant.
She assures the children that if they tell the giants she sent them, they will be given warm beds, roaring fires, and an invitation to the giants' grand autumn feast.
Oh, that is a masterclass in psychological temptation. When you are freezing and starving, the promise of a warm bed and a feast will make you ignore every red flag in the world. But I have to ask, what does Puddleglum think of this incredibly nice lady?
Puddleglum is, true to his nature, highly suspicious. He doesn't trust her sweetness, and he doesn't like the look of the silent black knight. He advises the children to stay away and stick to their harsh outdoor journey.
Good for him.
But the children are entirely consumed by the desire for comfort. They practically run toward Harfang. And this desperate rush for physical comfort causes them to make a devastating error.
Yes. They miss another one of Aslan's signs.
They do. A blinding snowstorm descends upon them as they are desperately trying to reach the giant's castle. The snow is so thick they can barely see their hands in front of their faces. Because they have their heads down, rushing blindly toward the promise of a warm fire, they walk directly through a deeply carved ravine filled with strange rock formations.
Okay.
It is only later, when they are inside the warm castle of Harfang and looking out a high window, that they realize those rock formations were actually the ruins of an ancient giant city.
Oh, wow. And finding a ruined city was one of the signs.
Yes. Aslan's second sign was to find a ruined city of the ancient giants. The third sign was to find a specific writing carved into a stone within that ruined city, and to do exactly what the writing said. Because they rushed, they missed the city entirely until they were looking down at it from the warmth of the castle.
They missed two signs in one go. That is a disaster. Did they at least figure out what the writing on the stone said from the window?
They did. From their high vantage point, they could see massive letters carved into the ruined pavement below. The words spelled out, "Under are me."
Under me. So they were supposed to go underground at the ruins, but instead they are trapped up in a castle with these so-called gentle giants. How gentle are these giants, really?
At first, they live up to their name. The children are given huge beds, warm baths, and massive amounts of food. But a creeping sense of dread begins to build. The turning point arrives when the children are exploring the castle and sneak into the giant's massive kitchen.
What do they find?
They find a gigantic cookbook resting on a table. Curious, they open it to the recipes planned for the upcoming autumn feast. As they read the ingredients, the horrible truth dawns on them.
Oh no.
The giants aren't fattening them up out of hospitality. They are the main course for the autumn feast. The recipe is for cooking man-cubs.
They are going to be baked into a pie. That is absolutely terrifying. And this is the perfect moment to introduce our next everyday English expression. When someone tells you a plan or a scenario that involves literal man-eating giants or just a very bad idea in the real world, the most natural reaction is to say, that sounds dangerous.
Yes, "that sounds dangerous" is a wonderfully versatile phrase. It is used to express caution, to assess risk, or to gently push back against a reckless proposal. It shows the other person that you are listening, you understand the stakes, and you are waving a caution flag.
Think about a business context. If your department head suggests investing 50% of the company's annual budget into a completely untested, highly volatile new market, you wouldn't just say no. You might lean forward and say, honestly, putting half our budget into an unproven market, that sounds dangerous. Perhaps we should start with a smaller pilot program.
Exactly. It is professional, yet clear about the level of risk.
In Jill and Eustace's case, staying in a castle where they are on the dinner menu sounds extraordinarily dangerous. They have to get out of there immediately.
And that escape initiates one of the most thrilling sequences in the book. They wait until the giants are asleep and manage to sneak out of the castle walls. But the giants quickly discover they are missing and release hunting dogs to track them through the snow.
It's a full-on chase.
The children in Puddleglum are running for their lives back toward the ruined city. Remembering the sign they missed, the words, "Under me," they frantically search the ruins. Just as the dogs are closing in, they find a narrow, dark crevice leading deep into the earth. With no other choice, they squeeze into the crack and slide down into the pitch blackness, escaping the hounds but falling endlessly into the unknown.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire, literally. Or into the dark in this case. Where do they land?
They fall into the underworld. C.S. Lewis describes it as a vast, subterranean magical kingdom miles beneath the surface of the earth. It is completely devoid of sunlight, illuminated only by eerie, pale, phosphorescent rocks. As they regain their footing, they are immediately surrounded and captured by an army of strange, sad-looking creatures called Earthmen, or gnomes.
Okay, captured again.
These gnomes march our heroes silently across a massive, dark body of water known as the Sunless Sea, toward a looming underground capital city.
The atmosphere you were describing sounds incredibly claustrophobic and oppressive. Who is ruling this depressing underground world?
When they are brought into the royal palace, they discover a shocking truth. The ruler of this dark realm is none other than the beautiful lady of the green kirtle, the exact same woman who smiled at them in the snow and sent them to be eaten by the giants at Harfang.
I knew it. The beautiful lady in the wilderness is always an evil witch in a fantasy story. The temptation is never just innocent hospitality.
Your fantasy instincts are spot on. She is indeed a powerful witch. Fortunately, she is away from the palace when they arrive. Instead, they are greeted by a young man who resides in her luxurious underground apartments.
A young man.
He is very polite, almost cheerfully oblivious to the gloom of the underworld. He tells them he is the queen's protege and that she has promised to make him the king of the surface world very soon.
Okay, so he seems harmless enough, but is there a catch?
A very severe catch. He warns them with absolute seriousness that they must leave his presence before midnight. He claims that he suffers from a terrible, violent fit of madness every single night.
Madness.
Yes. He tells them that to protect everyone, the good and merciful queen has ordered that he must be tightly bound to a magical silver chair with heavy ropes before the madness takes him. He looks them dead in the eye and says, "If I am ever released from the chair while I am mad, I will turn into a deadly green serpent and strike you all dead."
A green serpent. The exact same creature that killed Prince Rillian's mother. Okay, the pieces are coming together.
Yeah.
This young man clearly doesn't know who he really is. He is entirely brainwashed. The witch made him forget his real life.
Ah, Let me gently interrupt and correct you right there.
Hmm.
That is an incredibly common grammar mistake for English learners, especially when narrating events in the past tense. You just said, the witch made him forget. The correct sentence is actually, the witch made him forget.
Oh, why do I always do that? Made, not maked. English irregular verbs are so frustrating. You just want to add ed to everything.
It is entirely understandable. The human brain looks for patterns. In English, regular verbs form the past tense simply by adding ed. Walk becomes walked. Talk becomes talked. So logically, your brain tries to make the word make into maked.
Right.
But make is an irregular verb. Its forms are make, made, and made. The English language is full of these irregular verbs because many of our most common words trace their roots back to Old English or Germanic origins, which didn't use the ed system. They changed the internal vowel instead.
That makes sense historically, but it is still tough to remember in the moment.
It is frustrating, but mastering made is essential because it is used constantly in daily speech. The witch made him forget.
Thank you for the correction. It is so easy to trip up on that. So the witch made him forget his past. But she didn't just use therapy or lies. She used dark magic. This brings us to a fantastic vocabulary word. Enchanted, or being under a spell.
Yes. When we say someone or something is enchanted, we mean they've been placed under a magical spell or magic that controls someone's mind. Their perception of reality or their physical form is being controlled by magic. The root of the word comes from the Latin cantare, which means to sing. Historically, spells were often sung or chanted over a person.
That is fascinating etymology. So you could say, the witch enchanted the castle. Or in our case, the young man is enchanted, he believes the witch's lies. The children must realize that this madness he experiences every night isn't madness at all. It must be the only time the enchantment wears off.
Precisely. Jill, Eustace, and Puddleglum are highly suspicious. They realize that observing this young man during his midnight madness might be the key to their entire mission. They decide they must stay and watch him be bound to the silver chair. They need to analyze his ravings.
This is the perfect scenario to use our next collaborative expression. Let's figure this out.
Let's figure this out, yes.
This is one of the most useful phrases you can have in your professional vocabulary. It means, let us work together to solve this complex problem or to analyze this confusing situation.
It is highly cooperative. If you are in a meeting and the quarterly sales numbers suddenly drop inexplicably, a good manager won't panic. They will put the data on the screen and say, okay, team, these numbers don't make sense. Let's figure this out together. It invites collective problem solving.
And Jill, Eustace, and Puddleglum are a team, and they are committing to figuring out the mystery of the silver chair. I am on the edge of my seat. What happens when midnight strikes?
The young man allows himself to be tightly bound to the massive silver chair by the Earthmen, who then leave the room. The children and Puddleglum wait in the shadows. As soon as the clock strikes midnight, a horrifying transformation occurs.
What happens?
The young man's cheerful demeanor vanishes. His face contorts in agony and desperation. He begins thrashing against the ropes, screaming that he has been kept in a dark prison for 10 long years. He begs, pleads, and commands them to cut the ropes and set him free.
But he told them just an hour ago that if they untied him, he would turn into a snake and kill them. How do they know which version of him is telling the truth? Is he crazy now, or was he brainwashed before?
That is the agonizing dilemma. They are terrified. They stand there trembling, watching him scream. But then the young man stops thrashing. He looks at them with desperate, lucid eyes, and he begs them to untie him in the name of Aslan.
Oh, the fourth sign. Here's where it gets really interesting. Aslan told Jill that the person who asks them to do something in his name would be the lost prince.
Exactly. This brings us to one of the most powerful thematic and linguistic moments in the story, revolving around the vocabulary word trust.
Trust. T-R-U-S-T. To trust someone means to believe someone is honest or to have firm belief in their reliability and ability. You rely on them completely.
Yes.
In a modern context, you might say, I trust my best friend. Or trust the data we gathered. It shows the market is shifting.
Here, the characters face an ultimate test of trust. Every rational thought, every instinct of self-preservation is screaming at them to keep the man tied up. He explicitly warned them he would become a lethal snake. But the sign from Aslan demands they untie him.
Whoa.
This perfectly introduces our next everyday expression, though with a profound twist. Trust your instincts.
Normally, trust your instincts means to follow your gut feeling. If you're walking down a dark alley and you suddenly feel a sense of dread, you trust your instincts and turn around. You don't wait for logical proof of danger.
But Lewis flips this concept on its head. In this dark, deceptive underworld, Their instincts are entirely rooted in fear and self-preservation. Their instincts tell them to run away. If they trust their instincts, they will fail the mission.
They have to do something much harder. They have to trust the instructions they were given over their own terrified instincts. They have to exhibit faith in Aslan's signs.
That is a staggering philosophical challenge. I want to throw this question directly to you, the listener. What would you do in this situation? Put yourself in that dark room. A man who might turn into a giant venomous snake is begging you to untie him. Do you trust your friends easily even when things look incredibly dangerous? Do you draw your sword and cut the ropes? Or do you trust your fear and leave him tied up? It is an incredibly difficult choice.
It really is. It is the defining moment of their journey. So, trembling, knowing it might be their last act, Puddleglum, Eustace, and Jill draw their swords. They step forward and slice through the heavy ropes.
They break the chair.
I'm holding my breath. Does he turn into a snake?
He leaps up from the chair. He does not turn into a snake. Instead, he grabs his own sword and furiously hacks the magical silver chair into pieces. The moment the chair is destroyed, a palpable weight lifts from the room. The enchantment is permanently lifted. He turns to them, clear-eyed and sane, and reveals his true identity. He is Prince Rilian of Narnia.
They did it. They completed the mission. They found the prince.
They found him, but they are far from safe. The destruction of the chair echoes through the palace. The heavy doors swing open, and the Green Witch returns. She strides into the room. She takes one look at the shattered silver chair and the freed prince, and her face goes cold with fury.
Does she pull out a wand and start blasting them with fireballs?
Her magic is far more insidious and psychological than that. She doesn't use physical force. She walks over to a fire burning in the hearth and throws a handful of bright green powder into the flames. Instantly, a thick, sweet, incredibly heavy smoke begins to fill the room. She then picks up a stringed instrument and begins to strum a slow, hypnotic, thrumming melody.
Mind control. She is trying to use a magical fire to erase their memories of Narnia and Earth. She's trying to re-enchant all of them at once.
Exactly. She paces around them in the sweet-smelling smoke, speaking in a soft, rhythmic, purring voice. She tells them they are confused. She softly insists that there's no such place as Narnia. She tells them there is no surface world, there is no sun, and there is certainly no Aslan. She claims that their memories of the sky and the lion are just silly children's games, make-believe dreams they invented to comfort themselves in the dark.
That is terrifyingly manipulative. Gaslighting combined with magical smoke. Does it work?
Tragically, it begins to work flawlessly. The magic is overwhelming. The heady smoke dulls their minds. Jill, Eustace, and even the newly freed Prince Rilian begin to nod. Their eyes glaze over. They start repeating her words in a monotone drone, agreeing that Narnia must just be a dream. They are moments away from being permanently enslaved.
This is awful. Someone has to snap them out of it.
And someone does. This brings us to the absolute pinnacle of heroism in the story, centered around our final vocabulary words, brave and courage.
To be brave means to face danger, pain, or difficult situations without showing fear or acting despite your fear. And applying that to Puddleglum, he is the one who steps up, isn't he?
He is. And the noun form is courage. Let's address the pronunciation quickly, as it is a common stumbling block. The word is courage. It is pronounced K-U-R-I. The first syllable rhymes with fur. The second syllable does not rhyme with the word page or age. It's very soft and short. K-U-R-I. Let's practice. K-U-R-I.
K-U-R-I. It flows very quickly. So who shows this ultimate courage in the face of the witch's mind control? Puddleglum.
Yes, the character you would least expect to be the hero. Puddleglum, the miserable, complaining pessimist. He feels the magic dissolving his mind, but he fights it. He realizes that the source of the hypnotic spell is the sweet-smelling green smoke rising from the fire. So with immense physical courage, he walks over to the hearth and stamps out the magical fire with his bare feet.
He steps into the fire barefoot. That is incredible.
And Lewis includes a spectacularly vivid sensory detail here. The sweet, heavy, enchanting smell of the witch's smoke is instantly replaced by the violently strong, sickening smell of burnt marsh wigglefoot. As you can imagine, a swamp creature burning his foot creates a terribly pungent odor. That sharp, painful smell of reality instantly shatters the hypnotic trance in the room. The children and the prince snap out of their daze.
That is brilliant. Pain and a terrible smell break the pleasant, deceptive illusion. How does the witch react to her spell being ruined by a burnt foot?
She loses her elegant composure completely. Enraged, she drops her instrument, and right before their eyes, she transforms. Her body elongates, her legs vanish, and she morphs into a massive, hideous green snake. The very same serpent that killed Rillian's mother 10 years ago. She lunges and wraps her massive coils around the prince, attempting to crush the life out of him.
But Rillian isn't enchanted anymore. He can fight back.
He does. With the immediate courageous help of Eustace and Puddleglum, they attack the serpent with their swords. In a desperate struggle, Rillian kills her. He severs the snake's head. The witch is dead. Rillian has finally avenged his mother and secured his own freedom.
What an incredibly satisfying climax. The evil is defeated, the prince is saved, and Puddleglum is an absolute legend. But they are still miles underground. How do they get back to the surface?
With the witch dead, her spell over the entire underworld is broken. The gloomy Earthmen, who were also enslaved by her magic, suddenly wake up. They rejoice, realizing they are free to return to their true home, a land of intense heat and brilliant gems located even deeper near the core of the earth, called Bism.
Wow, Bism, so they pass through the land of the gnomes.
They do. They navigate the treacherous tunnels upward, escaping the underworld and finally bursting out into the cold, clean air of the surface world in Narnia.
The relief they must feel to see the sky again after that psychological torture. Do they make it back to the castle in time to see King Caspian? Remember, he was a very old man sailing away when they arrived.
They do, but it leads to a profoundly bittersweet resolution, which is a hallmark of C.S. Lewis's writing. Prince Rillian arrives at Cair Paravel just as his father's ship returns. The elderly King Caspian is carried off the ship on a stretcher. He's at the very end of his life. After 10 long years of heartbreak, father and son are finally reunited. Caspian gives his son his blessing, embraces him, and then quietly passes away. The entire kingdom of Narnia falls into deep mourning.
That is genuinely heartbreaking. They completed the mission, but they couldn't stop time.
It is a mature, poignant ending for a children's book. Following the funeral, Aslan appears to Jill and Eustace. He congratulates them on their immense courage and tells them their task is done. He takes them back across the sky to his own country, high above the clouds. And there, Lewis gives us a breathtaking image of resurrection. The dead body of King Caspian is lying in a stream in Aslan's country. Aslan instructs Eustace to take a sharp thorn and drive it into the lion's paw. A drop of Aslan's blood falls into the water and flows over Caspian. Miraculously, the old king is revived, but not just brought back to life, he's restored to his vibrant, strong youth.
Wow, that imagery is incredibly potent. A beautiful reward for the old king. So where does this leave Jill and Eustace? Do they have to go back to that awful experiment house?
They do. Aslan tells them they must return to their own world. But he allows the young, revived Caspian to cross over with them for just 5 minutes. The three of them burst out of the garden door back onto the school grounds in England. The bullies are chasing someone else, but when they see Jill, Eustace, and a warrior king step out of nowhere with drawn swords, they panic. The children chase away the bullies using the flat part of their swords. Not the sharp edges, just slapping them with the flat metal to chase them away in terror. The school administration is exposed, a new headmaster is brought in, and Experiment House eventually becomes a decent place to learn.
What a deeply satisfying conclusion. The bullies get their comeuppance, and the heroes bring a little bit of that Narnian courage back to the real world. I want to dive into the deeper themes of this story. If we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at the core themes written by C.S. Lewis, what stands out to you the most?
The most prominent theme is courage, even when you feel afraid. Puddleglum is the ultimate embodiment of this. He spent the entire journey believing they were marching to their deaths. Yet he stepped into a magical fire to save his friends anyway. True courage is acting rightly, in spite of your overwhelming fear.
I think that is a vital lesson for anyone, whether you are a child facing bullies or an adult navigating a scary career change. You don't have to stop being afraid to be brave. What about the dynamic between the three travelers?
That is the second major theme: friendship and teamwork. Jill, Eustace, and Puddleglum are not idealized, perfect heroes. They bicker, they complain, they make catastrophic mistakes, like missing the signs and getting captured by giants. But their flaws balance each other out. They accomplish a seemingly impossible mission not through individual perfection, but by supporting one another through their respective failures.
It is an incredibly realistic portrayal of how human beings actually achieve great things, which leads me to ask you, the listener, a reflection question. Who is the Puddleglum in your life? That friend who might complain but is always bravely by your side when it counts. We all need a Puddleglum.
It is a wonderful question to carry with you.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a massive amount of ground today, both in the narrative of Narnia and in the mechanics of the English language. Let's do a rapid-fire recap to reinforce your learning today. First, the story itself. Jill and Eustace journeyed to Narnia, got a mission from Aslan, traveled with Puddleglum, fell into the underworld, found Prince Rilian enchanted in the silver chair, and broke the spell.
And interwoven through that epic tale, we explored essential English vocabulary. We discussed having a mission, a core objective, embarking on a journey, a long trip, and what it means when someone is enchanted or under a magical spell. We looked at how to escape a dangerous situation, the vital importance of learning to trust, the nature of being pessimistic, expecting bad things, and how to be brave.
We also practice some incredibly natural, everyday expressions that will elevate your conversational English. When you accidentally forget to do a task, you can softly admit, it slipped my mind. When a colleague proposes a reckless idea, you can warn them by saying, that sounds dangerous. When your team hits a confusing roadblock, you can rally them by saying, let's figure this out. And when you are faced with a difficult choice where logic fails, you might need to trust your instincts, or in this story's case, trust the signs you were given.
Before we conclude our analysis today, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from the source material. It revolves around that climactic moment in the underworld when the witch is using her heavy smoke to convince the heroes that Narnia, the sun, and Aslan are just made-up dreams. Before he stomps on the fire, Puddleglum gives a remarkable speech. He looks at the witch and concedes her point. He says, suppose she is right. Suppose the sun and Narnia and Aslan are all just made-up play worlds. He tells her that even if they are made up, those made-up things are vastly better than her dark, miserable, real underworld. He proudly declares that he chooses to live like a Narnian anyway. It challenges you to consider how the stories and play worlds we love actually shape our deepest values in the real world.
What an absolutely beautiful and empowering thought to end on. I want to take a moment to praise you, the listener. Thank you for dedicating your time to practicing your English with us today. Keep going, even if it's just a little bit every day. Keep immersing yourself in great stories, keep practicing your vocabulary out loud, and make sure to keep watching the rest of the videos on the channel.